The camera flash was a physical blow, blinding me for a second. On stage, under the heat of 1,000 lights, they handed me the plaque, a single, perfect Michelin star. The culmination of 20 years spent over blistering stoves, sacrificing holidays, relationships, everything. My Chicago restaurant, Veridian, was officially one of the best on earth. But my eyes weren't on the award. I was scanning the crowd, desperately searching for one face. My father's. The man who told me I was throwing my life away. The man who said, "A chef, Leo, that's not a real profession. You're a nobody if you don't become a lawyer like me." His words, even now, echoed louder than the applause. He wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. The crowd began to thin. The flashes faded, but the weight of his absence was heavier than the plaque in my hand. My father, Arthur Gallo, is a man built from closing arguments and cold, hard facts. A titan of Chicago corporate law. His world is mahogany desks and leather-bound books. Mine is stainless steel and searing heat. I was 18 when I told him I was turning down a law school scholarship to enroll in culinary school. He didn't yell. Worse, he just looked at me with a chilling disappointment that could freeze fire. "The Gallos build legacies, Leo," he'd said, his voice quiet but sharp as a razor. "We don't serve appetizers." That sentence became the ghost in my kitchen. It fueled every 16-hour shift, every blistering burn, every ounce of passion I poured into my craft. Veridian, my restaurant, became my closing argument. Every dish was a piece of evidence, every 5-star review a sworn testimony. This Michelin star, this was supposed to be the final verdict, the irrefutable proof. But his empty seat tonight felt like a final, silent judgment, and it gutted me more than any insult ever could. That ghost has haunted me for 20 years, but the truth is, it was born long before culinary school. It was born in the chilling quiet of our Lincoln Park brownstone. My father's house wasn't a home. It was a courtroom where I was always on trial, and the verdict was always just shy of good enough. His love was conditional, tied to mock trial victories and high grades in classes I loathed. The only warmth in that house came from the kitchen. It was my mother's sanctuary before she got sick, a place of bubbling sauces and the scent of fresh basil. It was the only room where the air wasn't thick, with the pressure of becoming Arthur Gallo's son. After we lost her, the kitchen became mine. It was my escape. While my father was at his firm, billing hours that bought our sterile silence, I was losing myself in her old, flour-dusted cookbooks. I wasn't just cooking. I was trying to conjure her memory, to feel that unconditional warmth again. I was 13 when I spent an entire weekend perfecting her classic osso buco. I remember the pride I felt, the rich, complex aroma filling the house. I thought, this will be it. He'll finally see me. He came home late, briefcase in hand. I'd set the table perfectly. He sat, loosened his tie, and looked at the plate. He took a bite, then another. For a heart-stopping second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Then it was gone. He nodded slowly. "Adequate, Leo," he said, his voice flat. He then slid a thick file across the mahogany table. "Now, the Henderson deposition. I've highlighted the key inconsistencies. Walk me through how you dismantle the witness's credibility." My heart sank. The osso buco grew cold on my plate. It was never about the food. It was never about my happiness. My passion was a liability, a frivolous distraction from the preordained path he'd laid for me. He saw my apron as a costume I needed to shed for a suit and tie. Every dish I made was an act of rebellion he refused to acknowledge. He didn't want a son. He wanted a successor, an heir to the Gallo legal dynasty. My turning down that law school scholarship wasn't the beginning of the war. It was just the moment I finally fired back. And his empty seat tonight, it proves that for him, that war has never ended. The drive back to Veridian was a blur of streetlights smearing across the rain-slicked glass. The Michelin plaque sat on the passenger seat, its polished wood catching the fragmented light. It felt less like a trophy and more like a tombstone. I'd won, but I'd lost something far more fundamental tonight. When I pushed through the familiar oak door of my restaurant, the sound hit me like a wave. My team, my family, was in full celebration mode. Champagne corks popped, cheers echoed off the exposed brick, and my sous chef Maria rushed forward, beaming. She wrapped me in a hug that smelled of sparkling wine and victory. "We did it, Leo! We actually did it!" she yelled over the din, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. I forced a smile, hoisting the plaque for them to see. They erupted. For 10 minutes I let myself be carried by their pure, uncomplicated happiness. I was their leader, their chef. I owed them this moment. But the ghost was still there, a cold spot in the warm room. I eventually excused myself, retreating to the quiet of my shoebox office in the back. I sank into my worn leather chair, the muffled sounds of the party seeping under the door. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a deep, cavernous exhaustion. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from a fellow chef. "Congrats, man! Saw this. Brutal timing, but you know what they say about press." Attached was a link to a Chicago Chronicle article. The headline read, "A star is born, but at what cost?" The troubled ascent of Chef Leo Gallo. My blood ran cold. I clicked the link. The article started with praise for the Michelin Star, a few obligatory paragraphs about my culinary style. Then, it pivoted. It spoke of an unnamed source, a longtime family associate, who painted a different picture. A picture of a son who stubbornly turned his back on a prestigious legal legacy. It mentioned the immense financial strain Veridian had placed on family resources, a lie spun from a loan I'd paid back with interest a decade ago. It framed my ambition not as passion, but as a reckless, selfish rebellion. Every sentence was a subtle twist of the knife, expertly designed to bleed the joy from my triumph. I felt the air leave my lungs. These weren't just random speculations. The details were too precise, the language too clinical, too legal. It was a perfectly constructed character assassination, delivered with the precision of a closing argument. Then I read the final paragraph from the source, and the world fell away. His mother was a gifted home cook, a woman of immense warmth. It's a tragedy that Leo, for all his technical skill, has always struggled to replicate that warmth, both on the plate and in his personal relationships. I dropped the phone. The words struck a place so deep and so private it was a violation. My mother. He had used my memory of her, the one pure thing in my life, and twisted it into a weapon against me. Only one person on earth could have delivered that blow. Only one person knew how much it would hurt. This wasn't a simple absence. This wasn't disappointment. This was a deliberate, calculated attack. My father hadn't just skipped the ceremony. He had waited for my moment of ultimate victory, and from the shadows, he had tried to burn it all to the ground. The war wasn't over. It had just been formally declared. For a long moment, there was no sound but the frantic thumping in my own ears. The muffled cheers from the main dining room felt a world away. Rage, white-hot and volcanic, threatened to erupt. I wanted to scream, to shatter something, to give the pain a physical form. But then, a cold, clear thought cut through the chaos. A voice that sounded chillingly like my father's. Emotion is a weakness, a vulnerability to be exploited. I didn't move. I just breathed. In. Out. The fire inside me didn't die. It cooled. It condensed from a raging, uncontrollable inferno into a single, hard point of ice in the center of my chest. He had laid a trap. He'd expected an emotional outburst, a public denial, a messy, tear-streaked defense that would only prove his source's point about my lack of control. He had cross-examined me in the press and was waiting for me to crack on the stand. Slowly, I picked my phone up from the cheap linoleum floor. I read the line about my mother again. This time the wound didn't bleed. It cauterized. He had used my most sacred memory as a legal tactic. A calculated move to dismantle my credibility. For 20 years I had tried to escape his world, to prove that my passion was a worthy legacy. I was wrong. I didn't need to escape his world. I needed to conquer it using my own weapons. He thought my kitchen was my weakness, a flight of fancy. He failed to understand its true nature. It's a place of ruthless precision, of absolute control, where timing is everything, and a single mistake can ruin the entire creation. It's a place where you exploit an opponent's weakness, an oversalted sauce, a poorly seared scallop with devastating effect. My father had just revealed his weakness. He still saw me as the emotional boy who just wanted his approval. He had no idea who I'd become. This article wasn't an attack. It was an opening. My father, the great legal strategist, had just made a fatal error. He'd started a public war with a man who now had a bigger stage, a brighter spotlight, and a story the world actually wanted to hear. He wanted to fight in the court of public opinion? Fine. But the battle wouldn't be fought in a courtroom. It would be fought in my dining room, on television, in every interview I gave. I stood up, my movements deliberate. I picked up the Michelin plaque. The weight felt different now. Not a burden, but a weapon. I smoothed down my chef's jacket, walked to the door, and stepped back into the celebration. Maria saw me first, her smile faltering as she saw the look on my face. It wasn't despair. It was focus. The kind of focus I get just before service, when every detail must be perfect. The party was still loud, the champagne still flowing. I raised my glass. "To new beginnings," I said, my voice clear and sharp, cutting through the noise. They cheered and raised their glasses, their faces glowing with a triumph that felt pure, untainted. My smile, however, was a carefully constructed mask. The ice in my chest was spreading, sharpening my senses. My war council wasn't a room full of lawyers. It was my kitchen brigade. My opening statement wouldn't be filed with a court. It would be seared on a plancha. The next morning, the sun cut through the tall windows of my apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The celebration had ended hours ago, but the silence now was heavier than the noise had been. On my coffee table lay the Chicago Chronicle, folded neatly to the offending article. I read it again, the words no longer feeling like an attack, but like a blueprint. My father had unwittingly given me the schematics to his own fortress. My phone rang, shrill and insistent. It was my publicist, Jessica, her voice a frantic buzz of damage control. "Leo, I am so sorry. I've been on the phone all morning. We can draft a response, a no comment. We can say the source is a disgruntled former employee." No, I cut her off, my voice even, a surprised silence on the other end. "No, Leo, this is a character hit. They're questioning your integrity right when your star is at its brightest. We have to." "We do," I agreed. "But not by defending. We attack, by celebrating." I could almost hear her confusion. "Jessica, I want you to call the biggest morning show you can get. A national one. Tell them I want to give an exclusive interview. Live, from Veridian. I want their viewers to see the stars, see the restaurant, see the team. An interview? Now? What are you going to say about the article?" "Almost nothing," I said, a plan crystallizing with chilling clarity. "I'm going to announce a new tasting menu, a special one. We're calling it The Inheritance." I could feel her processing the name, the double meaning, the sheer audacity. "The theme," I continued, pacing my sunlit living room, "is a tribute to my origins, to the person who first taught me that food is love. My mother." I took the weapon he had used against me and began polishing it into my own shield. "I'm not going to mention him. I'm not going to mention the article. I'm going to tell a beautiful story about my mother's cooking and how it inspired every single thing we do here. We're going to reclaim that narrative. Completely. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, the panic in her voice had been replaced by a dawning respect. "That's brilliant, Leo. It's unassailable. Who attacks a man paying tribute to his deceased mother?" "Exactly," I said. "He wants to talk about warmth? I'm going to radiate it. Let him look like the cold, bitter man in the shadows while I'm standing in the full glare of the national spotlight, surrounded by my family, honoring the memory he tried to tarnish. Get me the interview, Jessica." That night, Veridian was closed to the public. I stood before my team in the main dining room, the chairs stacked, the tables bare. Maria stood beside me, her expression a mixture of concern and fierce loyalty. I didn't tell them about the revenge. I told them the story Jessica and I had crafted. "This star belongs to all of us," I began, my voice echoing in the space. "But it has roots. It started somewhere. For me, it started in my mother's kitchen. Her legacy wasn't about prestige or power. It was about flavor, family, and warmth. In her honor, and to celebrate this moment, we are creating a new menu, the Inheritance. Every dish will be a modern interpretation of a memory. It will be the most personal, most important menu we have ever designed." A murmur of excitement went through the crew. They saw a tribute. I saw a declaration of war. Later, when the restaurant was empty and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerators, I went to work. The centerpiece of the Inheritance had to be the osso buco. His dismissal of it, adequate, had been the original wound. Now, it would be the blade. I laid out the ingredients under the harsh kitchen lights: the veal shank, the mirepoix, the saffron for the risotto. But this wouldn't be my mother's rustic, comforting dish. This would be a masterpiece of technique and precision, a closing argument on a plate. I would deconstruct it. The meat, braised not for 3 hours, but for 24, sous vide until it was impossibly tender, a testament to patience he never had. I would sear it, creating a crust that was my unbreachable defense. The risotto would be a perfect golden disc, each grain of carnaroli rice distinct, infused with a saffron so potent it was practically evidence. But the masterstroke was the gremolata. My mother's was a simple mix of parsley, lemon, and garlic. Mine would be an acid gel, a vibrant, shocking green, dotted with micro-parsley and infused with a Meyer lemon essence. It wouldn't be a garnish. It would be a sharp, irrefutable rebuttal, cutting through the richness of the veal with devastating clarity. As I worked, I spoke to him in my head. "You deal in facts, Father. Here are the facts of my profession. The precise temperature of the water bath. The exact ratio of butter to Parmesan. The Maillard reaction. This is not a hobby. This is chemistry. This is art. This is a legacy you are too blind to see." I plated the first test. It was beautiful, technical, unforgiving in its perfection. It was everything his adequate was not. It was a dish that could only be created by a chef who had bled for his craft, a chef who had earned his star. My phone vibrated on the stainless steel counter. It was Jessica. I picked it up, my heart hammering a steady, controlled rhythm. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice electric. "Forget the local morning shows. The story is out there, Leo. The Michelin Star, the anonymous hit piece. It's a narrative, and they're biting. Hard." "Who, Jessica?" "Good Morning America. They want the exclusive. Live from Veridian, Friday morning. They want to talk about the journey, the pressure, the star, and yes, they're going to ask about the article." She paused. "Are you ready for that?" I looked at the plate in front of me. The perfected osso buco, my inheritance. I looked at the plate, my inheritance, my answer. "I'm ready." I told Jessica, my voice a low, steady hum. Friday morning arrived with the sterile efficiency of a television production. Veridian was no longer my restaurant. It was a set. Cables snaked across the polished floors like thick black vines. Banks of lights, hotter than any salamander broiler, banished every shadow, turning my dining room into a stage. My team moved with quiet anxiety, prepping mise en place in the background, a living, breathing part of the scenery. Maria gave me a thumbs up from the pass, her eyes saying everything I needed to hear. I was in my element. This was just another form of service, the most important of my life. I wore my crispest chef whites, the Michelin Star embroidered over my heart. The GMA host, a woman with a famously empathetic smile named Diane, settled into the chair opposite me. "Chef Gallo," she began, her voice smooth as a creme brulee, "a Michelin Star, in Chicago. That's the dream, isn't it?" I smiled, a genuine one this time. It's an incredible honor for my team. They're the ones who make it happen every single night. I gestured to my crew, who swelled with pride. I was already establishing my narrative. This was about family, about us, not me. We talked about the journey, the long hours, the philosophy of Veridian. I spoke of flavor and memory, keeping it warm, personal, accessible. I was building my case, piece by piece, for the millions watching. Then, Diane's expression shifted subtly. The empathy was still there, but now it was layered with a journalist's precision. The cross-examination was about to begin. "Leo, this moment of triumph has been complicated." An article came out. A source, claiming to be close to your family, has painted a picture of a difficult path, suggesting you turned your back on a family legacy. She held my gaze. The world seemed to hold its breath. This was the moment he was waiting for. The moment I was supposed to crack. I didn't. I let a small, thoughtful silence hang in the air before I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table. "Diane, when you pursue a dream with everything you have, not everyone will understand the sacrifice," I said, my voice even measured. "My father is a brilliant lawyer. He built a legacy in a world of contracts and arguments. It's a world I respect, but it was never my world. My legacy, my inheritance, came from my mother." I saw a flicker in Diane's eyes. She was hooked. She taught me that the first and most important ingredient is love. That warmth is a flavor you can taste. I paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Pokes, nometh." The article mentioned that, didn't it? A supposed lack of warmth. I didn't let her answer. I smiled, not a bitter smile, but a sad, knowing one. Some people can only see the world through their own lens. They might not understand that a kitchen brigade is a family, that nurturing your staff is a form of love, that feeding people, truly nourishing them, is the warmest act one can think of. I had taken his accusation and turned it into my mission statement. I hadn't denied the article. I had risen above it, making the anonymous source sound small and cold. "That's why," I continued, my voice building with passion, "in her honor, we've created a new menu. It's called The Inheritance." As if on cue, Maria approached the table, carrying a single, beautiful plate covered by a silver cloche. She placed it before me with the reverence of a sacrament. "Every dish is a memory of hers, reimagined," I explained, my hand resting on the cloche. "This one, this is the heart of it." I lifted the lid. A plume of fragrant steam rose, catching the light. The camera zoomed in on the osso buco. It was perfect. A glistening tower of veal, a golden disc of risotto, and the sharp, defiant green of the acid gel gremolata. "This is my mother's osso buco," I said, my voice thick with real emotion now, weaponized. "She made it with love. I've tried to honor that with technique. The veal is braised for 24 hours to achieve a texture you can't get any other way. The risotto is a testament to precision. The gremolata, that's the clarity. The final word." Diane was speechless, staring at the plate. "It's a work of art," she finally breathed, I looked directly into the camera, into millions of homes, and into one silent mahogany-paneled office somewhere in this city. This is my legacy, Diane. It's not about turning my back on anything. It's about building something new, something warm, something that's mine. After the cameras were off and the crew was gone, silence returned to Veridian. My phone was buzzing incessantly on the counter. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. I just stood with my team, with my brigade, the only family I had ever truly known. I finally picked up. Jessica's voice wasn't a buzz anymore. It was a thunderclap of triumph. "Leo, it's nuclear. The whole narrative has flipped. Our website crashed from reservation requests. The comments on the GMA feed, they're calling the source heartless, a ghoul. They're not just on your side. They're ready to go to war for you. You're not the rebellious son anymore. You're the devoted one, protecting his mother's legacy. You didn't just win, Leo. You annihilated him." I listened, a strange calm settling over me. It wasn't the warm glow of victory I'd once imagined. It was the cold, clean satisfaction of a perfectly executed plan. I hadn't used passion to fight him. I had used his own tools against him. Logic, strategy, public perception. I had constructed a narrative so emotionally compelling, it was legally airtight. As Jessica gushed about a potential book deal, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. An unsaved number I knew as well as my own. The box. Her author, Gallo. My heart didn't leap. It didn't sink. It held steady. I opened the message. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a concession. It was just 5 words, stripped of all emotion, a clinician's assessment of a rival's gambit. Times a distasteful but effective performance. I stared at the screen. For 20 years I had craved his approval, his warmth, a simple, "Well done." I never got it. But this was better. This was a nod of acknowledgement from the opposing counsel. He wasn't speaking to his son. He was speaking to a worthy adversary who had, in the public arena, dismantled his case. He saw me. Finally, he truly saw the man I had become, not a chef, a strategist. A slow, grim smile touched my lips. The approval I had spent a lifetime chasing had been replaced by something far more potent. Respect. The cold, grudging respect of a defeated king. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt the crown tilting. The dining room was no longer just my sanctuary. It was my courtroom, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that he would have to make an appearance. The judge always attends the final verdict. Has a parent ever pushed you towards one career path when your passion was somewhere else entirely? Share your story in the comments.